G'day guys, Rob here, and today join me for part 5 of saving a Ferrari F40, a sad eBay story. And if you watched part 4, I completed the dashboard, the flocking on the center console, I glued in the gate assembly, and I also flocked all the back firewall of the interior floor pan as well. So going to keep moving forward today on more details and starting to assemble some of these bits and pieces. But I've got one more thing to do on the center console. Now, in my collection of parts from Scale Details, I also have this scuff shield which goes on the side of the center console adjacent to the accelerator pedal that sits here where my finger is. So this is going to be glued into position, and then I'm going to actually fit the 4 little copper bolt heads in there as well, just to detail that up a little bit more. I'm just going to do that now before I glue the center console into the interior tub, because it will be too hard to do it once it's glued into position. So that is what I'm going to do now. Just basically, I have pre-drilled the 4 little holes that go through this. Now I've just used a tiny drill bit here. This is my trusty Tamiya battery operated drill. This is a super handy tool, and this tiny drill bit, I just bought a set of drill bits off eBay. These are micro drill bits, and as you can see, there are some tiny little drills here. This is actually the smallest one, which would be about 0.75 of a millimeter, so tiny little drill bit. So I can definitely recommend using one of these. It's not a super powerful drill for big holes, but it's perfect for all this little stuff. So that's basically what I am going to do first. Now, even though I have flocked the center console, this will just glue in on top of it. So I'm just going to do that now. And I'm just going to use some Bob Smith Industries Instacure for this. Now, I do also, when I trim all of these photo etch parts, I do use a little Tamiya diamond file, which is perfect for photo etch, so you can actually file off those little dags of the photo etch as well. So pretty easy deal. Just going to add a bit of glue onto the back side of this little scuff panel, or scuff guard protector, whatever you want to call it, and then basically just going to glue it into position and hold it down. Now, the one thing with that Bob Smith Industries Instacure is, as the name suggests, it is an instant bond, so you've got to be pretty quick with it and get it into the right position to start with. So that is basically glued on. Now I can just come back with the little drill and just make sure that the holes do line up, just by running the drill through the hole again. And they've lined up luckily, so that's a good thing. And now I can actually glue the little bolts in. So the little bolts again came with the kit. They basically give you a ton of little copper bolts. So I'm going to use the smallest ones in this packet, and then they will be glued into position. Just tip those out. Very small, so your tweezers are going to come in very handy there. And we'll just dig those 4 little bolts out, and then they can be glued into position. So that's the size of the bolts we're using. They're really very small, and to basically glue these in, obviously you don't want to apply the glue straight with the bottle, so as always I just use a little chopped up bit of a business card, put a little bit of glue on the business card, and I'm just always apply the glue with a toothpick. So we're just going to start with one first. I'm just going to insert the toothpick into the hole, and that will leave a little bit of glue residue around the outside. I can then pick up a bolt with the tweezers and basically glue that into position. If I can get my finger in there, These are quite tiny, but they will work. Easier with a magnifier if your eyesight isn't that good like mine, so I might just do this with a magnifier. So yeah, just using the magnifier here, it's just a lot easier to get the glue in the right spot. And then I can use the magnifier again to actually line the bolt holes and the little bolts in place. And just push that in with the tweezers, use my fingernail. Basically, so we'll get the magnifier out of the way. So as you can see there, that is one of the little copper bolt heads in place. Now I'll just continue to do that with the other one. So I will make sure that the hole lines up and is pre-drilled all the way through. Just get rid of the dag, and then same process again. Just insert the toothpick with the glue on the tip of it into the hole. And that way when the bolt slips into the hole, the glue will hold it in place. Definitely handy to have some very fine tweezers for that. So that is another little bolt at the top, and I'll just repeat that process for these last two as well. So yeah, if you don't have yourself a magnifier, definitely a good tool to have for this sort of fine little work. Makes life a lot easier. Get one more of these little bolts. And this is obviously going to be essential when I actually start the engine modifications, because the engine has a ton of little bolts on it, and that is going to really test the skill level. So we'll just get this last little bolt head in place. And it's just these little details that are going to make the difference on the whole build and really make it stand out from a standard kit. It's got a tiny little bit of excess glue on there. Just a damp Q-tip will get that off. Get the magnifier out of the way, and there we have the scuff plate in place with the 4 little copper bolts. So that is the last little piece I needed to do before I glue the center console in, and we'll do that now. Okay, so before I actually glue this center console in to its designated spot like that, I just want to show you another little modification that I have done. So in the base here, you can see I have glued in a couple of pieces of styrene tube. One is smaller than the other, which glued inside the other one, and that basically leaves a little vertical upstand for the gear shifter to sit in. Now you won't see that little piece because it's underneath the center console, but that's just going to enable me to glue that gear shifter in after the center console is glued in. Now the original one actually had, that's the shaft, and as you can see it's got a little ball and socket assembly, and that's what used to go into the bottom, which allowed the gear shift to move. Now this is a static model, so for me I don't need the gear shift that moves back and forward and maybe gets jammed in a position I don't want it. So I've deleted that one, and we'll be using the Scale Details metal gear shifter and gear knob. So that's what I've done for that little hole there. Now as far as the gluing in the center console, obviously I've got all of this satin carbon fiber decal work here. I don't want any glue spills on there. So what I usually do is apply the glue to areas that you won't see. Now, being that the seat will sit into the interior tub like here, if you have any glue seepage on the side here, it's not going to matter so much. So I'm not going to apply any glue through this area because that would ruin my carbon tub here. So I'm just going to apply some glue at the back edges or the back bottom faces of the center console, and also the front where it's up underneath the dashboard, because when the dashboard goes in there, you won't see those areas either. So always try and glue in the non-conspicuous places. And for this, I'm just going to glue it straight out of the bottle. Basically put it down the sides and up the front, as I mentioned, where you won't see it. So if any glue does spill out, you're not going to see that at all. So that's a little bit of glue on the front and the back. And then I'm just basically going to hold that down into position. Again, I'm using the Bob Smith Industries Instacure because it does have an instant bond, which is exactly what I want for this purpose, because you don't want to be messing around holding the glue for 15 minutes or holding the parts down for 15 minutes until the glue dries. Okay, so that's the console in, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now that the center console is glued into position, I can now glue the gear shifter knob in there. So just basically a bit of glue on the card again. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the end of the gear shifter. I don't need a lot on there. And then I'm going to position that into the gear shift mount that I made out of the plastic tube. So just want to rotate that around until it's in the right position. A little bit of force just to bend it, and that is it. That is the gear shifter into position. It's in the nice center neutral position, as you can see, and that is that part. Now the only other part to add is the actual handbrake handle, and that just basically clips on to that mount, as you can see there. So that's quite a snug fit, so I'm not going to put any glue on that, so that you can have the handbrake up or the handbrake down. I'll probably just leave the handbrake down. But that is the center console in, gear shifter in, and the handbrake handle in. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I've actually got some rubber floor mats. Now these are from Scale Details as well. We've got one for the driver's side here, a smaller one for the passenger side. And these have a little extra ramp up bit here, which I've just basically folded down. And these will actually sit on top of the carbon area, and this is slightly raised either side, which is why this little strip at the front has been bent down, and they will basically fit in there like that. Now there is a footrest also that comes with a pocket kit. Now you can see it's a pretty ugly piece of plastic with a cast line in the middle of it, and that actually goes into the passenger side like so. Now I'm going to paint these metal rubber floor mats in a Tamiya rubber black, which will look good, but this little footrest piece needs a bit of work, definitely. So what I've done for this, let me just remove those pieces. I'll go and paint those in a minute before they're glued in. But what I've done with this piece here, I have actually made a little front cover piece here. Now what I've used here, this, if the camera will focus, this actually has some little grooves in it. I'm not sure whether the camera is going to pick that up, but what I've used here is some evergreen styrene sheet, and this is actually called a 2050 V-groove. Now what that appears the same as is the inserts of this rubber mat here. So it actually has some little slots in between with a wider pattern, and that's going to very closely match the rubber floor mat. So I've basically just traced the shape of that footrest and cut a piece of that evergreen styrene V-groove sheet. And now I'm just going to glue that onto the face of this plastic piece, just to give it that extra bit of detail and look like a rubber mat on the front of the footrest as well. So just using the Bob Smith Industries glue again, the Instacure, just to glue that into position. Slightly wrong position, so I'm just going to add a little bit more glue so that that stays in place. And glue that back on there. Like so. So this part will be painted in rubber black as well to look like a rubber mat on the face of that footrest, and that'll give that a little bit more detail as well. So when it's sitting in front of the passenger side footwell, it has the grooves in it to match and looks like rubber. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go outside and I'm just going to paint these three rubber mats, these three pieces. Now with photo etched pieces, if you just spray paint on there, it will scratch off, so I always just spray these metal parts in a Tamiya primer first. Just helps the paint really grab onto the photo etched parts, and then I'll spray them in the rubber black. So I'll go and do that now and I'll rejoin you in a moment. Okay, so that is the parts painted in rubber black. So the rubber black I'm talking about, this is just a Tamiya TS82 rubber black, which just looks a bit more like rubber than a standard matte black, and that is basically the driver's side. And you can probably see better the lines in this now, maybe. That is the footrest that basically is going to sit in front of it. So there you go, that's probably a better shot there. It's as close as I could find with some styrene sheet that would actually match the grooves into the footrest as well. So now that those have dried, I can just pull those off the ice cream sticks and they will be ready to glue into the interior. So I use ice cream sticks a lot just to hold parts. Just stick a little bit of double-sided tape on the back of that and that enables me to hold the part, which works quite well. And yeah, the double-sided tape can be easily removed off the metal parts. So these are basically ready to glue back into position. So with the footrest on this side, I'm actually just going to clip that back into position. You can see that it does have the notch outs to go over the carbon sill and the center console. And with this particular piece, rather than put glue on the legs and let it spew out everywhere, I'm basically just going to put that in position, and I'm actually just going to put a little bit of glue on the tabs underneath where they come through onto the body, so that will be the least damage or spill through of glue. So just a couple of little dobs of glue on there. Always just use Q-tips, just wipe the excess away. So it's a super strong super glue, that Bob Smith Industries, and that will actually hold that footrest in place, as you can see. So that is the rubber black footrest. Now for these other mats that actually go onto the floor, I'm actually not going to use the super glue. I'm going to go back to the micro scale crystal clear because there's no fogging or hazing from this glue. And I don't want any hazing from super glues onto my satin carbon tub. So first off, I always test fit or just trial. So I'll actually sit that little piece in there first. Happy with how that little rubber mat will sit in place. So then I can pull that back out again. And then I'll actually just use a toothpick again to apply a little bit of glue to the underside of these metal rubber mat simulated pieces. And yeah, rather than put glue near the edge of the part, I'll actually just put the glue in the center. And I know that that won't squeeze out. There's not too much on there that will squeeze out and ruin it. And then I can just basically slide that into position up to the footrest. So now we've got a rubber floor mat and we have the rubber mat on the face of the footrest also. Now I'll probably just put a little bit of weight on that to hold that down, or I'll hold that down off camera in a minute, but we'll glue this next one in as well. So just a couple of generous globs of glue onto this, and then that can be put into position as well. So as you can see there, that is now the rubber floor mats are in place. There's a little cutout in that side there. That's for the actual accelerator pedal to sit in there on the floor. But I'll let this dry and then we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, so I've done another little thing here as well, and I've actually glued in some little eyelets in here. Now, even though I'm building the street version of the F40, I'm not running the standard seat belts. I want to put the Saybelt racing harnesses in this one. So before I flocked the interior pan, I basically fitted the seats into position and then worked out an equal measurement behind the holes in the seats where the harnesses will go through. And the photo etched harnesses, as you can see here, all the latches and buckles, they will actually hook over those little eyelets, because there is a little gap in the back of the eyelet here. So I'll actually be able to slip the end of the harnesses over there. Now, I researched on the internet and just tried to find some pictures of F40s with harnesses, and they had these little eyelets mounted in the bulkhead, which is similar to how I've got my harnesses mounted in my real car. So I've just basically painted those gold, like a little gold eyelet, and I've put those 4 in there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is attach the rollover hoop. Now again, with this one, I just used the edge of the blade and scraped it along to remove the seam lines on the plastic part. I then gave it a bit of a sand to make it nice and smooth, and then I primed it in Tamiya primer and just sprayed it in Tamiya semi-gloss black. So that is the next thing that I'm going to fit in here, and that just goes back into the factory holes like so. And as I mentioned before, instead of actually gluing the feet that come into this and then risking glue spreading over the flocking, I'll actually insert that in there first, and then I'll actually add the glue on the underside of the part. Now that will glue those little feet in place. Again, I always just use a Q-tip just to wipe some of that excess. The glue will spread into that join. And as I said, basically just check that it's straight up and down. But that just is a cleaner way of gluing things rather than putting glue on the legs of this and then it's squishing out around on your painted area or your flocking. So that is that part in there. Now you'll also notice there's a couple of holes here. So that is where the retractable seat belts go. And even though I'm not using the factory seat belts, it still has these little covers for the seat belts. So I'm just going to, I painted those in matte black after I scraped off some of the plastic left behind by the sprues. So basically just going to push those back in place so that the covers are there, even though there will be no seat belts. This model is going to have a standard seat belt delete and have the racing harnesses fitted. So as you can see, they're just the little covers for the real seat belts. Now they're a pretty tight fit, but I will just add a little drop of glue on those tabs just behind so that they never come out. So there we have it. So now we've got the little eyelets on there for the racing harnesses, excuse me, to clip onto. We've got the inertia reel seatbelt covers on there, and also the rollover hoop as well, positioned so it's nice and straight up and down. So that is basically it for that part of the build. Now what I might move on to next is the brake brake and accelerator pedals. Now, these are some parts that come with the Tremonia photo etch set, which is on here. Now, this has the brake pedals and the accelerator, and it's also got some instructions that come with it to show how to bend this photo etch piece, glue it together, and form the accelerator pedal, as you can see here. So it's just basically folding the two sides of this piece, folding the little tabs over, and then slightly bending the accelerator face, and then gluing it into position to then come up with this 3D shape accelerator pedal. Now, it does have a little side bracket on there as well, and there's also a pin that will go through that too. So I'm going to work on that one. Now, the kit from Scale Details also had one of these where all you have to do is bend those two pieces together. I'm going to actually bend up both pieces and see which one I like best. But these are the Tremonia brake and clutch pedals, and you can see that they've actually got a little bracket as well. The idea is that you cut the plastic pedals off the arms and then glue these in situ with the little brackets behind. Now, again, these are the Tremonia versions, and these are the ones from Scale Details. Now, I kind of like the detail in these ones a little bit more. It has a countersunk hole in the drilling of the pedals, so I'm definitely going to use those ones. But as I said, I'll make up both of these accelerator pedals and see which one I like best.
Perfect.
Now, as you can see by that time lapse, that was a very fiddly little thing to do. It had little tabs on both sides that had to be folded over, and that's to aid in the assistance of the gluing of the face panel on there of the accelerator pedal. So reasonably happy with how that has come out. Now, comparing this one, that is the Tremonia version, and that is the Scale Details version of the accelerator pedal. So I think that the winner here is the Tremonia version, so that's the one I'm going to go with. And it's also got a couple of little pins and brackets to go on there as well. But before I fit those ones on there, I just wanted to show you that. So there you can see their instructions to fold it and then glue it together. But unfortunately, I'm not going to leave it silver like this, because from all the pictures I've seen, the accelerator pedal in a Ferrari F40 is black. So I'm going to go and give this a coat of black paint, same as the little end bracket, and then I'll be able to finish the assembly and put the little pin in there and the brackets and washers. So go and paint this one now, and then I'll rejoin you. Okay, so that is the accelerator pedal painted. I've actually painted it in semi-gloss black rather than gloss black, and also the little bracket on the side. So now it's time to assemble the little pins into it. So what it comes with is a couple of little copper washers, a pin, and they are all spaced together. So what I'm going to do is put a bit of glue on there. Again, just using the toothpick, just going to put that in the hole and add a little bit of glue. And then the pin goes through the base of the accelerator pedal, like so, as you can see there. Now it's got one of those little copper washers on this side as well. So I'm going to add some more glue onto this side, which is the back side, so you don't really see that. And now I'm going to slip that little fitting over that metal tube, as you can see there. And it's going to push into the other side of the pedal. So you can see there the little copper pin, or the little copper washers either side, the pin runs through that. Then the next thing, there is a spacer on the inside. So I'm going to add a bit of glue to the shaft of that pin. And then this larger washer, or this larger copper pin, is going to slip on the inside there. Now that is going to be the spacer for the side mounting bracket, which goes on there, so that will slip over that. So again, I'm going to add some more glue onto the end of that copper washer, and then I'm going to slip the bracket over that. Now the positioning of that, I want the accelerator pedal not straight up and down, but pretty close. And I think that's probably about the angle. Doesn't matter too much, but as you can see there, so now that is the accelerator pedal with the little copper sleeves inserted either side. The silver pin runs all the way through, and you've got that little copper spacer on the inside as well. Now I'll let that dry fully, and then I'll just use my nippers and I'll cut off the excess of that silver pin. I might actually put a little bit more glue on the inside of that, just to give it a really good bond so it doesn't come loose. And then, yeah, as I say, when that fully dries, I'll cut off the excess of that pin, and then it will be ready to glue into the floor and the side of the center console. I'm going to use the Bob Smith Industries Maxi Cure, which is a thicker style of super glue. It's good for gap filling and to get this glued into the flocking side of the center console a bit better. So that should work a little bit better, hopefully, because the base of the accelerator pedal doesn't really stick onto, it's not level with the floor, so the glue joint is pretty much just the side bracket. So what I'm going to do is just try and prop that into position until the glue goes off, and then hopefully that is in the right position. So that looks about right. So as you can see now, that is the accelerator pedal in place, glued to the side of the center console. So yeah, pretty happy with how that looks. It looks pretty realistic and a lot better than the standard plastic accelerator. Whoops, it's just come off there a little bit. Just need to hold that in place until the glue goes off, unfortunately. But yeah, as I say, that is the standard accelerator pedal in the Pocket kit, so it's not the most detailed thing. So this photo etched piece is a lot more detailed. Now this glue has got around a 15 to 20 second grab time, so I'll just hold this until the glue goes off. And again, just making sure that the part is glued in straight. And it's all these little details that are really going to make the interior of this model so much better than the standard form. So that's basically in there now, and time to move on to the next piece. Okay, so that's dried in there nicely, so really quite happy with how that accelerator pedal came out. Now next thing I'm going to tackle here is the brake pedals. Now this is again the pedal set out of the Tremonia photo etch kit, and these are going to replace the standard pedals. So first thing I need to do is cut away these standard pedals. So I'm just basically going to use a wooden block here and try and just score this a few times so that I can remove these pedals, because I don't want to remove any of the actual arm that holds the pedal on there. Just the face of the pedal. I'm just going to score that on both sides just to see if I can actually break it loose. Obviously with a part like this you want to be really careful with your hobby knife. You don't want to slice yourself, so always cut away from yourself, and as I say, try and use a timber block or something like that to hold the part and make it a lot easier to cut it away. And yeah, I've just continued to score that on the back until I could snap one off, and I think this one is nearly there as well. And there we go. So that is the factory Pocket pedals removed off the brake arms. Now I'm just going to use my hobby knife and just take away the little edges of the plastic left from the pedals. And I do want to smooth this up a little bit as well, the face where I've scored and snapped. So I'm just basically going to use the sanding block and just basically sand the face of those pedals the same, just to make them nice and smooth for the new photo etch pedals. Now these are also painted black, so I will give these a bit of a sand. There's a few dags on there as well. You can get rid of those with a hobby knife and then just give it a bit of a sand with some sandpaper to make it pretty before you paint it. So these brake pedals actually have these little side clamps, so there's actually a little screw that goes through the pedals and through the holes in the brackets, and then those brackets are folded over and then screwed, or not screwed, glued to the side of the arm. So I'm just going to do that now. I'll probably do this on the time lapse so the video is not too long, and then I will paint these clutch and brake arms in black, and then I can glue the finished assemblies onto the pedals. So we'll do that now. Okay, so you'll have to excuse me there. I actually had to just do those off camera because they were just so darn fiddly. So if you look on the back side, it's got the little angle bracket. So I actually just glued the little copper sleeves in there first, and then glued on the little brackets on the back side of those pedals. Now, because there is a bolt sticking out next to the fixing bracket, I've actually just measured and drilled a couple of little holes in the stem of the brake arm so that those pedals will slip on and glue into place. So yeah, just a super fiddly little thing, and I didn't want to muck it up while I was trying to do it on camera, so I just decided to do those little parts off camera. I drilled those holes so that the bolt hole will fit in the arm, and these will glue tight to the arms of the clutch and the brake pedal. So what I'll do, these are going to stay silver, so what I'm going to do is just go and paint this in a semi-gloss black as well, and then I can glue those brake pedals onto that, and that will be the brake and the clutch pedal done. Okay, so that is the arms of the clutch and the brake painted in black. Now I can glue these pedals on, so that's what I'm about to do right now. So we'll get some more glue out. Then I'm just going to apply some glue to the back of the pedal, the back of the bracket that glues onto the side of the arm. And then glue them into position, making sure that they're nice and straight. So these parts are very fiddly, but the reward is that it looks a lot better once they're glued on compared to the factory parts. So I'll do the same. I'll add some more glue to the back of this bracket so I can glue onto the plastic part. Just turn that around. And that is the two pedals glued on there. So pretty happy with how they look. They look a lot better than the plastic pedals that come with the kit. And you can see there that they just glue onto the back side of those brackets. So that is the brake and clutch pedal done. So if we have a bit of a look, now these actually screw onto a part of the body and they will sit in there basically like that. So yeah, really happy with how they look. I think that looks fantastic, that accelerator pedal and the brake and clutch assembly. So now we can move on to another stage of the build. Okay, so I've added a little bit more detail to the tub as well. So you can see that I've added these little rivets here. I've also added some of the little rivets around the footrest on this side as well, and over on this side too, that has the rivets to match the real car, fixing parts of the tub together. So pretty happy with all those extra little details. Now there's just one more thing that I am going to add, and that is these little trim panels that I've made up which go on this section here. So on the pictures of the real cars, they have a little trimmed panel there with a couple of little bolt heads in there. So I've just made those just out of some 0.5 mil styrene sheet. I've just added a little bend in there to match the bend in the tub, and I just flocked those, painted and flocked those in black flocking, added the two little bolt holes, and now they are ready to glue on. So that's basically the position that they're going to glue onto. Now with the styrene sheet, I just basically bend that around a steel rule to get a little bit of a bend in it so it stays in place. And I'm just going to glue those in now with a little bit of Bob Smith Industries Instacure. Just a couple of little dobs on the back, don't need a ton of glue on these things. And then that will simply glue into position onto the tub like so. So that just gives it that little bit of extra detail, matches the real car with those trim panels, and yeah, that's going to make this interior tub super detailed. Now those little bolt heads that I've glued on there everywhere, they are just from another Tremonia photo etch set, which you can see here, which has a couple of large straps on it, but it has a ton of little bolt holes. This is a 1/8 scale Tremonia set that I got off eBay, and that is where all these little bolts came from. So just going to glue the other side on there now as well. Make sure that fits on there, just bend it a little bit so it holds its shape. Then just some dobs of glue. And then we'll glue that one in place as well. Now this is pretty much all I'm going to do to this interior tub. It has as much detail in there as I want to give it, and I don't think there's much more I can do to it as well. Now I did get a few comments on the last video if I was going to add the green adhesive line into the interior tub. I've decided not to. The amalgam version doesn't have that on there, and I'm not going to add that onto mine as well. I just feel it looks a little bit cleaner without that. But as you can see there, that is the little trim panels now on the passenger side and on the driver's side as well. Okay, so that is going to wrap up the super detailing of this interior tub. Now I've just sort of used a little bit of blue tack there just to hold the pedals in place, just to give you a bit of an idea of what it looks like. But I think this episode's probably going to be long enough now as it is, so we'll get to all the seats and the seat belts and the carbon backs on the seats in the next episode. So yeah, I think that is going to wrap up this episode of super detailing the interior tub. So just to have a little bit of a look what it looks like with the dashboard in place. Really happy with how this is coming out so far, and I'm glad that I added those little interior trims as well just under the dashboard, so it makes it look a lot better. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for part 6, where I will continue on with the seats. We'll get those all in carbon decals, flock the fronts, get the seat belts all made, and then we'll be able to get some seats into the interior pan, which will look pretty awesome. And then that will pretty much wrap the interior up, and then I can move on to another part of the build. So as I said, I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below. But until next time, thanks for watching Rob's Model Cars.